Congressman Ron Paul is elected from the state of Texas in 1996 and currently holds that office. Please welcome Representative Ron Paul. Representative Paul, please open with 2 minutes worth of opening statements. Tell the people why you're here tonight. Or there.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm not quite there with you, but I'm in D.C. because I was anxious to come up here and vote against that debt increase that $1.2 billion. But I'm very pleased that you cooperated and helped out so I could still join you tonight on this very important issue. This is an issue that I've struggled with and worked with for many, many years because in medical school in the 1950s and 60s, the subject was never brought up until I had the unfortunate experience of seeing some nasty things as a resident. It made me very, very strong right to life. But one of the most interesting things that happened throughout my career in OBGYN, having delivered 4,000 babies, was the invention of the ultrasound. A friend of mine, a person who became a friend of mine, Bernard Nathanson, a man that was approximately my age, was breaking the law in the 1960s until he saw what he was doing with an ultrasound. So this was a tool that I was able to use very often. A woman would come in, she'd be pregnant, and talk about abortion. But it was very fortunate I had the ultrasound in the later years. In my early years, I didn't have the ultrasound. And it was an instrument that really told the patient and everybody exactly what they were doing. So there's no doubt in my mind about when life begins. For legal reasons, I'm liable, it's there, it's biological, and we have an obligation to protect all life.
Representative Paul, as personhood measures have been introduced into dozens of states, one of the most difficult legal challenges has been to describe the precise and earliest moment of when life begins. As the only physician in the presidential field and an OBGYN, how would you describe scientifically the moment life begins?
Well, it's a conception where you get into the problem is biologically and legally, it's a difficult job to know when that moment occurs because there's no chemical test or an ultrasound test or any legal test. So there is a period of time that is very difficult. Now, the way I address this, because we should resolve this, is that I have a bill that defines the beginning of life at the time of conception. But I also say that those states that want to pass laws and work this out in their different manners, that the federal government can't overrule them, that the Supreme Court can't hear these cases. So I want to protect the rights of the states to make these definitions. But the medical legal question is, it's if you're dealing about 3 or 4 days, it is not that easy. I think it becomes a very moral issue at that time on making decisions on what one does.
Representative Paul, in 1965, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists changed the definition of the word conception to mean implantation, and that is 7 to 14 days after the embryo is created. This change in definition was significant policy change and conditioned the protection that would be extended to early human embryos. This change in definition has had a policy impact on scientific research, the legalization and prescription of abortifacient drugs and devices, and much more. Which definition of conception do you hold?
At the time of conception, when the egg and the sperm join together. You know, this reminds me of what they did with the Hippocratic Oaths. When I graduated from medical school, they just dropped the Hippocratic Oath and the issue of abortion in the oath. But when my son Rand went to medical school, I went back, and they had a ceremony where they could voluntarily still take the Hippocratic Oath. So I was fascinated with this. What are they going to do about this? So they changed the Hippocratic Oath. Instead of saying that they wouldn't use an instrument of abortion, they said that they wouldn't do anything illegal, which meant that, the abortion issue became relative and legalistic and not a moral issue at all. So changing the definitions is, by an organization like the OBGYN organization, won't change reality. And this is the reason that I belong to a pro-life OBGYN organization, because we were very frustrated with our national organization. And we had a large number of people that belonged, but we were never able to control the votes at the national OBGYN organizations.
Representative Paul, given your well-known stance on the limited role of the federal government, what are the top 3 things that you would do as the federal government's chief executive to protect the rights of our unborn children and to stop abortions in our country?
Well, one of the very first things to do would be to stop all the funding, and I met with some frustrations with that, because there were many times I would introduce a resolution on overseas funding in particular, where it went to birth control, and too often there was a coalition, unfortunately, with some pro-life people and those others, and they would agree, well, as long as you send the money for birth control, we'll allow you to put the amendment in to not use the money for abortion. And I didn't buy into that, because all these funds are fungible. So I have a bill that would deny all funding for birth control and for abortion. That is just criminal to think that the government can take money from one group that vehemently opposes abortions and uses it for others. But I have another bill in that would have saved a lot of lives a lot sooner, and that's called We the People's Act. And this is saying that let's get rid of the jurisdiction of the federal courts. So, and we can do it with just a majority vote. All we have to do is pass a bill by the House and the Senate and signed by the President that said if a state has a law, like was in Texas, that brought about Roe versus Wade, you wouldn't have to take it to the federal court. That could have been passed 10 years ago and saved millions of lives. And some of the pro-life people would say, well, that's not a good idea, because we want an absolute prohibition at the federal level, which is, a goal. But you have to change the Supreme Court, or you have to change the Constitution. And I'm not against that. I support those desires. But in the meantime, I don't understand why we couldn't push this. As president, I would push this. I would ask the Congress to pass this law that says deny it to the Supreme Court and to the federal courts the jurisdiction over abortion.
You espouse a libertarian philosophy, which in effect would leave abortion up to the states. If abortion is solely a states' rights issue, then how will we ever protect babies in states that are not pro-life?
Well, you have to do what the Right to Life movement is trying to do right now, is that we have to change the courts or to change the Constitution. But my argument is you could do a lot more in the meantime. But you bring up the word libertarian, and I pride myself in being able to talk to a lot of people. Matter of fact, if you read my books on the abortion issue, the appeal there is to convert people. Because the Right to Life movement is very strong, and they're very influential, and I'm with them, I work very hard. But I'm also trying to get people who make a claim. Matter of fact, there are some in the freedom movement that say, well, the old argument of violation of the woman's rights. But I'm in a position as a conservative constitutionalist who is a position to talk to people, because one of the things that they take as a pledge is that they'll do no violence, and limiting a woman's choice is a violent act by not allowing it. But as a physician, I can talk to them and say, look, I'll show you on the ultrasound. I'll show you what they're doing. This is an act of violence. And this has helped me convert many, many people. So many have already told me this, that you made me think of this differently. And the books that I write now always has a chapter, on the right to life issue. So I think in the meantime, the best that we can do is to allow the removal of the jurisdiction. Just think what that does. It repeals Roe versus Wade immediately. And right away. But Why give up on repealing Roe versus Wade if we can do it with a majority vote and a signature? An individual like myself in the presidency would be glad to sign something like that.
Two quick follow-ups. One, why do you think the pro-life movement has not coalesced behind the idea of limiting the appellate jurisdiction of the court? It doesn't have a lot of support in the pro-life movement.
I know, and I wish somebody would tell me why, because when the pro-life people come and they talk to me about the pro-life issues, I ask, but nobody seems to have an answer. I guess I can give you one answer that I have heard, and I think we just already heard it in the form of a question. It is not monolithic. It doesn't have a total prohibition, and therefore it doesn't stop everything in all 50 states. But if you stop things in 30 states immediately and you work on the rest, I don't understand, what's wrong with that. I think we should do that. So I think I'm in a position where I say, you do what you can in the meantime, but at the same time, don't give up on the other efforts.
The second question is, I'm sure you and everybody in this room remember the infamous contraception question that Stephanopoulos went on for about 15 minutes in New Hampshire. At the end of the question, you referred to the Fourth Amendment as allowing or safeguarding the right to privacy, which would include contraception. Why would the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment, which mention the right to life, not apply just like the right to contraception?
Because I don't think anybody wants to give up their right to privacy. The Supreme Court, when they ruled on Roe versus Wade, the idea that they used the privacy issue really confused things. Because if you gave up your right to privacy, you give up your right to your private schools, your homeschooling, your churches. The privacy is an important issue. But the whole thing is privacy isn't the issue here. Life is the issue. If you say privacy of the woman, that's one thing. But what about the privacy of your house? It's the fact that a fetus is a person is what counts. I think the privacy issue is too much of a red herring. So yes, the Constitution is explicit on privacy. That's the last thing we want to give up on, and this is what the Patriot Act does. It gives the right of government to use search warrants that aren't even written. That they can search houses without search warrants. So to sacrifice our liberties would be, very, very bad. But you can protect life without sacrificing it. And I say it so often in my speeches that we don't have to sacrifice liberty, any liberty to make ourselves safe. We don't have to sacrifice liberty to enforce laws against violence. And all the laws of violence were, indicated by our Constitution. This was supposed to be a state matter. We weren't supposed to have, state police officers coming in. But the privacy issue is something you certainly don't want to give up. You're going to give up too much if you want to say, well, this is not a privacy issue. But the whole thing is you're not going to be able to say on the states' rights issue or the Fourth Amendment that you can't sell birth control pills. I don't see that as very practical. Matter of fact, my opinion is we can't solve all these problems with the law. I went through this struggle in the 1960s. And the 60s was a radical period. That's when the drug culture started, the war was going on, the pornography came out, and the abortion issue came in. And people changed, the morality changed, and this is what John Adams warned about. If the people are not moral and they are not religious, this society can't work. So it wasn't working in the 60s. Then the law was changed. The law was changed. So the laws of the morality caused us to get Roe versus Wade. So I argue the case, if you're going to get into real these details, we better think about our family life and our morality, because that is what will solve our problems more than finding out whether
Earlier, you mentioned a way to protect children in states that might not protect against abortion, protect those unborn children by using a constitutional amendment. Would you support a constitutional amendment to protect unborn children?
I have in the past. I've signed it. Jesse Helms' constitutional amendment I was a supporter of. If it was written as his was written or close to it, I would be a supporter.
In April of 2006, a part of the Massachusetts government-run healthcare law, Planned Parenthood secured the right to have a permanent representative on the Payment Policy Advisory Board. DeRoy Murdoch of the National Review noted that Governor Romney used his line-item powers to veto parts of the bill, such as the broader Medicaid dental benefits, but he neither rejected Planned Parenthood's place at the table nor insisted on including a pro-life representative. Would you use your appointment power as president to assure that pro-life advocates are represented in the federal government?
Oh, absolutely. If they're pro-liberty and believe in nonviolence, they're going to be pro-life. But under an administration that I would be head of, this would be a problem because they're not going to get any money. We shouldn't even have one
Representative Paul, where do you think our past pro-life presidents may have failed to advance the pro-life agenda truly, and what would you do differently from them if elected?
Well, I think I've already stated that because my frustration was that nobody would move along in the direction of removing the jurisdiction, which is a proper function of the federal government, would repeal Roe versus Wade. And I'm not quite sure why we can't get it, but we've had pro-life presidents and we had Republican conservative Congresses that generally voted pro-life. So I guess we'd have to ask each and every one of them, but I can't speak for them why they don't support it. But I've always worked on this, and I encourage people. I think it's a constitutional answer to a problem that we're not getting very far with because the number of abortions are not decreasing, and the funding is still there. And now with Obamacare, all funds are fungible. So even if you take away and say you can't do birth control and you can't do abortions, when you send money to a hospital, indirectly they just shift the funds around. So this whole idea, once the federal government is involved, you have these funds. So this is why I don't like so much government involved in our medical care system.
This question is from Hannah from Boiling Springs, South Carolina, and she asks, how does your Christian faith in view of the Bible influence how you value life?
Well, obviously, I understand very clearly where life comes from. It comes from a creator. It doesn't come from government. And neither do our rights come from government. And therefore, the obligation of government is to protect life and liberty. But this is very clearly a biblical viewpoint. And it's almost so bizarre where we are in society today that even when I was in medical school, it wasn't a major issue. So I see society deteriorating rather rapidly. I think there's so little respect for life. I think we lose too much lives. I think we're way too careless in going into these unconstitutional wars. That's a lot of lives. So there's a lot of things that we can do to be pro-life. The Catholic Church, matter of fact, is pro-life even against the death penalty. And I've been very public on my repositioning on the national death penalty. There's been too many mistakes made by government. I don't trust the government. There's been too many mistakes wrong about the DNA. So we should be more active in pro-life when we're thinking about the death penalty as well.
Representative Paul, how would you approach foreign relations vis-a-vis China's one-child policy and other nations that disregard the right to life?
Well, obviously we can't invade China to change their moral problems. Certainly we should not be sending them any money, and they still get a little bit of foreign aid from us, and we should, try to set a good example. So when we're not pure on the abortion issue, it's pretty hard for us to lecture other countries. But it's a strong argument, intellectual argument on this. And some of the, radical feminists who are real pro-abortion, we need to ask them more questions. Well, what do you think about the Chinese just aborting only female fetuses? This doesn't make much sense either. They don't have an easy answer for that. Just as one time I brought a subject up like that, similar to on the View, when they want to pester me a lot about why I was pro-life, and I brought up this, the whole idea, because their whole idea was the woman's body. I said, what about 1 minute before birth? I said, it's still the woman's body. Does that mean you can do an abortion, when the woman's in the 9th month? And they threw up their hands and they said, oh, that's not what we're talking about. So we need to use China and these incidents to make our arguments much clearer to the people that we're trying to convert.
And as a follow-up to that, Ronald Reagan, in his second term as president, took the time to release his Emancipation Proclamation of the Unborn Child, in which he formally declared the, quote, unalienable personhood of every American from the moment of conception until natural death. Reagan then stated that I will take care that the Constitution and laws of the United States are faithfully executed for the protection of America's unborn children. As president, how would you communicate to the nation, especially those that may be on the fence about abortion, your commitment to protect America's unborn children?
Well, I think I have to, restate a little bit of what I'm saying. First, you have to recognize the sanctity of life and the importance of it, and I do this, from a medical or legal viewpoint and from a religious point of view. But then from a viewpoint of being a federal officer, a president, or a congressman, you want to be able to facilitate the ability of the states to protect life. And right now, they're handicapped. They're hindered from it. They pass laws, and they're rejected by the federal government. So this is why we don't want to become overly dependent on the federal government. We complain about the federal government all the time. We don't want Obamacare and all these other things, but all of a sudden we think, well, if they have control of it, they're going to protect it. But they ended up getting control in the courts, and they've done so much harm. So this is the reason I say the best protection that we can give is give the right of the states to protect life as they see fit.
Closing comments, 60 seconds.
Oh, well, I want to thank you very much for having me on, and of course I think this is the key issue. I advocate, I'm a strong advocate for liberty, and everybody knows it. But liberty can't be protected if we don't protect life itself. And this to me is a moral issue as much as anything. I talked a little bit about that, about what happened in the 60s. And the laws so often reflect the people's culture. But we cannot change the people's morality by writing more laws. We can write more and more laws, but eventually we have to change the hearts and the minds of the people. We need stronger families, and we need more respect for life. Then the laws will respect that improved morality of the people. Thank you.
To understand what a historic event this has been. We have never had a majority field of presidential candidates to take such a strong position on the sanctity of life. We are winning in the battle of public opinion, and we are winning hearts and minds across this nation.